Okay, we're recording. Good morning, Sam. How are you? Happy
Morning,
Friday.
Claire. Yes, glad it's Friday.
Yeah, it's lovely to see you. And
And
thank
you?
you. Thank you so much for agreeing to take a bit of time to chat with me today. So what I thought would be really useful would be for us to talk about what it's like when a writer and a designer work together in partnership on a project. So in a minute, I'll just get you to introduce yourself and you can just tell us who you are. But and then we can talk about our water space living project that we did together. So do you want to tell us a little bit about Alelia
Sure.
and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I worked down in London for several years and then at a big agency in the Midlands. And I met my husband at the agency, or now husband, and he made me move over to Worcestershire. So I set up on my own 10 years ago now, set up Alelia Studio, and I get to work with multinationals all the way down to smaller startups and businesses. I've always worked with startups and small businesses, so I kind of understand them very well. And yeah, so I now work from home from my studio at the back, my very monochrome studio. And I basically tend to sort of creatively art direct projects and then bring in people like yourself, experts in different areas to work with, whether that be web development, copywriting, illustration, other elements or other designers depending on the size of the project. And that seems to work really well because it gives everybody sort of flexibility, and I can bring in the right type of person for the job, even with different types of styles of illustrators or different styles of copy, or, so it's quite useful that way. You can really bring in the expert for the job.
Yeah. And do you find that once you get into a working relationship with a client, you then go on to work with them going forward? So they come back, you do the initial brand work, you do the initial website, then they come back when they need brochures, and they come back when they need other collateral, and you can deliver across all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the idea, and it allows for a lot of consistency. So to have a really good brand is all about having a set of distinctive assets that you really communicate consistently. That's what makes a really strong brand, so that when people, for example, are scrolling through social media, you stop and it's that brand that's talking to you. So that's really important. So consistency is key. So that's really great if we can do that. Obviously, smaller businesses don't always have the budget. So, some of the time you create the brand, you give them the guidelines, and you kind of go off into
Send them off into the world. But I do think there's a place for that. I was talking to a client yesterday actually, and I do think it's our job also to advise a client when we think it's worth chucking everything at it, or when we think it's worth doing a little bit of a quick and dirty, getting something over a line, get it up and running with the idea that when they're perhaps clearer about their proposition, when they've started selling things, when the audience has made itself a bit clearer, so I do think it's important to know that that's an option as well, for clients. They don't always have to go in on day one with the full bells and whistles branding, because often, if you haven't got any experience of trading in a business, you're sort of pulling things out of thin air a little bit, aren't you? So I think there's always a place for that as well, and sort of working flexibly on how much you do now, and how you can also put things in place in layers, so you can leave the door open to build on it going forward.
Yeah, brands do change. If you're going to go whole hog, then and do a brand, you want it to have longevity. You don't design something and then be designing it again in 2 years' time. Of course, you're going to be refreshing things, but not necessarily your brand. It might have different promotions and looks and feels, things like that, but the core of your brand should stay the same, and you're only really tweaking very slightly where you need to keep that consistency and keep that recognition going. So it's super important to be able to do that, for sure.
Yeah. So shall we talk about how we worked together, how we did that for Water Space Living? Because Water Space Living was a brand new business, although they had experience in the boating market. The area that they were moving into with this business and this brand was completely new. So do you want to just take a minute to introduce the brand to us, how you began working with them, and then when and why you pulled me in on that one?
Yeah, sure. So they, were seasoned company owners, but they had this brand new idea, something that really isn't kind of on the market at the moment, where they were bringing a set of skill sets together from a boat builder to a developer and someone who's an expert in the waterways. And they were bringing this offer together where they build the boat and they find the mooring, and they're always in beautiful locations.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
so this is luxury barges, isn't it, really?
Yeah,
So
so it's apartments on so apartments on the water, really.
Mm.
And the reason they're so different is because they're not your typical houseboat. They are pretty amazing in terms of their interior design. Well, they are interior design, so they're not your kind of Rosie and Jim that you've got in your head, with the bucket on the
yeah
roof and all the rest of it. They are pretty freaking stylish. So they kind of had this idea, and when I first walked into a business meeting with them, they couldn't really articulate it to me. They kind of said, well, we'll tell you who we are, but what is the business that you're building? And they couldn't articulate it. And that's the point. If they couldn't articulate it to me in a casual environment, how are they going to get that message across in the communications?
So what did they come to you for initially? They'd come for brand design and a website, had they? Is that what they
No, like all clients, they come to you for the kind of physical thing. So they'll say
a logo.
I want a website. It wasn't even a logo, like I want a website. And I said, okay, so have you got a logo and a brand? And they did have a logo, and it just wasn't strong enough. It didn't represent what they were trying to sell. So we kind of started from scratch with that one, really. But yeah, most clients come and I want an exhibition stand, or I want a website. They want physical. And then you say, okay, what's the message? What's it going to look like? And
what's the thinking behind it?
That's actually what they need the help with. The website is just the vehicle. What they need is the message and the look and feel, because without that, you can't communicate. So very quickly I realized that they needed some help positioning their brand. So this is something you do way before you start the visuals. It's something where you work out who your audience is, how you're positioned in the market against your competitors and things like that. So we did an exercise like that. So we had to go back a bit before we could build them a website. And luckily we did it in a timely fashion, but luckily time was on our side a little bit. We had some time to do that. So as part of that process, we decided that once that was done, we needed to start designing a website. We needed to start doing the physical, that what they asked us for in the first instance. But it's very clear that they couldn't articulate the message, and we had all what it is, what it could be. But it's really nailing that down and being able to articulate that in a particular tone of voice as well. So when you're speaking, when that brand is speaking, it's very clear it's them, and it is on brand. So I did start the process of a design because I needed to think about what type of content they might want to put on this, because they didn't have that. So I had to work with them to work out what type of content should go in there, and then start to map that out. And then that's where I said, okay, kind of got an idea of that we might want a big headline here, or that we need to explain this here, or we might need to talk about the boats here. But actually, how do we say that, and in what tone do we use? And that's where I contacted you and said, help, we need some help with the messaging side of things, because of course it's really important that those two things work together. It's a bit like in the let's say the old-fashioned days, we still do it now, but in the advertising days, anyone that's watched Mad Men, you know that you get a copywriter and an art director working together, and that art director is responsible for the look and the feel and that kind of overall arching message, and the copywriters then working together with you. So they work hand in hand to come up with that really cool kind of eye-catching headline, along with the really cool eye-catching visual. And without the two, it's very difficult to get that message across. So
that's it. They inform each other. And I think what I've noticed over the last while is that because we've all been so obsessed with social media over the last 10 years, everything's been so visual, it's got easier to get to access good design, and it's got easier for us to all become familiar with what that looks like, that I think you know, business owners, people working on their own brands, they're all very literate and comfortable around the ideas of logos and color palettes and fonts and, you know, typography and that kind of design stuff. But for some reason, the copywriting and the value that adds, which is the other side of the brand coin, you know, that sort of gets, I don't know, it gets overlooked, or it's maybe it's harder because it's less tangible until you've actually got the words. I don't know. You know, you might point at something on Instagram, maybe clients come to you with this and say, I like this, make it look like this. But people don't do that with writing. I think it's maybe harder to imagine what your tone of voice and your writing is going to feel like. So yeah, obviously I couldn't agree with you more. And I think I love it when I get that opportunity to work with a designer from the beginning of the process, and we're both putting ideas in the pot, because that really does change how we structure content through the website and how the customer would, or the user would, flow through that website, the journey they would take, and how we get them to recognize themselves in that content, you know, how we speak to them so that they go, yes, that's my problem, or yes, that's the solution I'm looking for, or yes, that's the thing that gets me excited. And I think what was lovely about Waterspace is that it genuinely is a new concept. As you say, you know, the boats don't look like your average barges. They are wider for a start, so they genuinely are spacious. The interiors, you know, feel like you're in a penthouse in Canary Wharf. So it's a really cool new concept, and you know, and that's what I wanted us to be able to get across in the writing, so that people who might not have considered that they would ever live on a barge or a boat, you know, think, oh yeah, actually that's pretty cool. So it was a fun one to work on.
It is,
in
yeah.
that respect.
And you know, over the years, I'm sure, like you know, you've worked on all sorts of businesses and industries, and it's really nice to work on something so new and innovative in the way they're kind of bringing it to life. So that was really important. You know, it wasn't something that, and because those guys all own other businesses and they were coming together, you know, they're busy people, and for them to sit down and write something would take, you know, like any of us, would take us a lot longer. So actually you think, well, I'll do it myself and save some money potentially, but actually you don't, because you stop doing what you're supposed to be doing, what you're good at, and what you earn money doing, trying to do it, and it takes you 3, 4, 5 times longer, and you wouldn't ever do it as good a justice as if you were to get a professional in. And I think you're right in saying that people they are a lot more brand savvy. You know, there's things like Canva and there's Pinterest, and, you know, people are talking more about brand. They're not necessarily doing it in a very consistent way, having those eyes on that side of things, but definitely copy does seem to, oh, well, I can do that myself. I know about the business, I'll do it myself. And yes, you can write about it, but the key to writing good copy is that you are selling the benefits of what you're selling, not just telling people about what you do or what you sell. Getting under the skin of, well, why is that going to benefit the audience? That's what they buy into. So it's really, really, really key. I mean, yes, we can all write some copy. You know, we all did English at school, and we got spell checkers and Grammarly and things like that. And yes, we can all do that. But it is literally just words on a page. It doesn't have that meaning, authority, or emotion, or consistency when you're writing something. And actually, sometimes we write from ourselves, and that necessarily isn't the right style. So what I like isn't necessarily what I design for a customer, because I may not be target audience. And it's the same with when you write. It's the same principle.
That's it. Which is why, so you would write. That's it. So we did a tone of voice. Well, I did a tone of voice document as the starting point, didn't I, when we started working together on this? So the tone of voice, which sort of identified, and it's a great way to get down. It's only a few pages. It's not a particularly, you know, complex document, but it just sort of nails those key personality points. So, and it's also an opportunity to test the boundaries before we write the copy, to see exactly how bold or not a client does want to be. So we define some personality traits. I put in some example copy, so I perhaps rewrite some of the copy they've already got, or I put in some examples for sort of strap lines or headlines or whatever. And it's a really good sort of starting point for the client to say, I love that, that's really working for me. Ooh, that feels a little bit edgy, or that's taken that bit too far, and we sort of rein in our boundaries then before we go out and write the actual copy.
Yeah, because it can be quite a costly exercise, you know, if you get a whole website written at once. It's like you design it all at once. I'd never do that. I'd always design a couple of pages to see how that's feeling.
That's it.
And because not everybody can visualize it, so to really get into the detail of how you want that copy to come across, how do you want your, not even the copy, but your message that you have, how do you want your business to come across? Is it expert, professional, serious, or is it a bit quirky, edgy, and you know, excuse me, all those things are super important, because that's, people are going to feed off that and go, okay, this brand is, oh yeah, they're a bit edgy, they're a bit cool, I want to be part of this brand, I want to be. So I think that is really important, to do that tone of voice exercise, and especially with a company like this, because where do you start? It's brand new, you know. We don't have any strategy, we don't have any research. It is brand new, so a lot of it is really pulling on the resource of professionals with insight and experience to be able to bring something brand new to life. Don't you think?
Yes, exactly, to make it feel living and breathing when it's really very, very new. Yeah, it's a challenge, but, and you know, it was joyful for me to be able to work with you on it from the beginning, so that, and I'm, you know, when my writing goes live at the end of a project, to see it in situ with great design, that it's working in harmony to create that whole brand, is just so lovely. Because, you know, there are occasions when I write for a client, and when it gets uploaded or when it goes into print or what have you, it's not quite got over the line visually. And I'm sure you have situations when that occurs as well, the other way around, you know, when you design something beautiful and actually then it falls slightly short on the wording. So it's just deeply satisfying, I think, for us when that website went live. We all went, yes, it just looks beautiful. And the business is doing really well. I know, you know, it's been a challenging year for everyone, isn't it? But you know, from what I hear, you know, it's been super well received, and I think that's because people get it. You know, I think when you land on the website, it's easy to see what they do, it's easy to see why it's exciting and different, and it just communicates that so clearly, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that message is so, because you've only got a few seconds to grab someone's attention in any community situation. So I think that you get it across as succinctly and, you know, in an edited version as you can, because you haven't got long to grab that person's attention. And that's really why I came to you, because we were starting from scratch. That's why, because you have you know, a lot of brand and strategy background, you understand brand, and it's not just writing a paragraph of copy about a company, it's coming up with it from scratch, really. And sort of working together on that meant that it just really enhanced the content that I was trying to kind of pull out the bag for them, because we didn't have anything. And also we can then discuss, well, we need to get this across, how do we do it? Because there's so many ways of doing it. It could be via an interview, it could be bullet points, it could be an infographic.
That's it. Yeah, the format and of that's content.
Really nice to be able to brainstorm. It's not just copy, because people don't have a lot of time to read. So what it's got to be is really rich and edited and succinct to me, to get that message across really quickly. And if it needs to be not a paragraph of copy, there's lots of other ways you can get content across. And that's why it's really nice to work together, to go, well, we could do this, but we've got quite a bit of copy on that bit. Could it be, well, it could be this, or it could be this format, or we could lay it out. And then I go, I like that idea, and we could do it like an infographic, and suddenly it just brings it to life in a really engaging way than it would have done if you're writing the copy yourself, because it would naturally be paragraphs, you know. So it's not only the quality of it, it's the getting it over in a succinct way. So
that's it
for me.
Well, I hope that that's sort of given people an idea of the advantages of getting your designer and your writer working together up front, and how I think, you know, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts when you do approach a project like that. So thank you so much for explaining that, and I'm looking forward to our next project together.
Me too.
That's going to be fab. And I will thank you for your time, and we'll chat soon.
But it's good. Nice to see you, Claire.
Nice to see you. Cheers, Sam.
Bye. See ya.